We've gotten samples from anybody and everybody that says they're close, and we happily pay for them. We'll get a 500-pound super stack, which to me is a representative sample. I can't tell much from a 1-gallon Ziploc bag of your finest hemp hurd.
That's Cameron McIntosh, Hempcrete builder at Americhanvre Cast-Hemp here in Pennsylvania. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Harlock, and today I'm going to talk to Cameron about, that's right, Hempcrete, how the industry is developing, what sorts of projects he's worked on this year, educational opportunities, all sorts of things, including the IRC code index, and where we are with R-value testing for Hempcrete. So all that and more. First, a quick sponsor break, and then we'll come back with a few nuggets of hemp news. This episode is brought to you in part by Impactful Ventures, an investment and incubation company focused on supporting startups and other initiatives that play a vital role in reversing the adverse effects of climate change. They strive to amplify enterprises which bring innovative green opportunities to the forefront and empower those making a significant impact for a sustainable future. You can learn more at impactfulventures.org. This episode is brought to you in part by IND Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, where their mission is to provide innovative agricultural products and services to connect American farmers with the pioneers and businesses that see hemp as a way to bring real and lasting change to our communities and planet. IND Hemp. Okay, welcome back. How you doing? I'm doing okay. So here we are. It's just about the middle of December 2022. Today's date is December 14th, if you're keeping track. So a couple of nuggets of hemp news. This first one comes out of Westchester, New York. It's on westchester.news12.com. It says that Senator Hinchy's bill to expand use of industrial hemp is signed into law. A Hudson Valley state lawmaker's new bill to expand the use of industrial hemp in the state was signed into law by Governor Kathy Hochul. Senator Michelle Hinchy's bill will now instruct several state groups to create a plan to expand the uses for industrial hemp in manufacturing and construction. This includes hemp textiles, packaging, and hempcrete for building. Hinchy says hemp is the material of the future and that this will position the state to be a leading producer, which will help many farmers in her area. Here's a story from textileworld.com. It's written by Rachel Davis, and it says, hemp, growing a made in the USA industry. Buzzwords come and go in the textile industry, the story says, but two words in particular have had some staying power over the past few years: sustainability and hemp. Not surprisingly, the two words are connected, and one man chasing hemp as the next big thing in sustainable fibers is Guy Carpenter. He is not alone in the United States in that endeavor, but is widely acknowledged as one of the forerunners. Carpenter's experience in the fiber industry goes back many decades, and his exposure and interest in hemp began when he was working in Europe. He eventually founded Bear Fiber Incorporated in 2017 when he realized no one else was exploring the potential of hemp fiber in the United States. Bear wants to be the supplier of choice when it comes to high-quality textile-grade hemp fiber, and the company is highly invested in reestablishing American hemp as a source of sustainable natural fibers. The company operates under the trademarked logo, "Hemp Makes It Better," and it's a motto Carpenter firmly believes in. I met Mr. Carpenter out at the Montana Hemp Summit this past summer, and at some point we're going to get him here on the podcast. This next story I read on hemptoday.net, and it says that Texas researchers say they'll have new hemp varieties ready by 2024. Researchers in Texas have embarked on an ambitious project to develop hemp varieties for dual cropping of fiber and grain that can thrive in the state's climate conditions. 10 to 20 varieties are expected to be developed by the beginning of 2024, and the goal is to release another 20 to 50 a year later under a program at Texas A&M University. The challenge is to develop cultivars that are heat and drought stress tolerant and express less than 0.3% THC, the federal limit that defines industrial hemp from marijuana, according to Russ Jessup, a hemp breeding specialist in the Department of Soil and Crop Sciences at Texas A&M AgriLife Research, a part of the university's Department of Soil and Crop Sciences. All right, so there you go. Just a couple of news nuggets for you this week. Are there other stories out there happening? Yeah, there are. Do you know of a story that I ought to cover? Maybe you do. Send me an email, podcast@lancasterfarming.com. All right, so moving on with today's show, we're going to talk to Cameron McIntosh. I met Cameron several years ago. I've been to a couple of his workshops. I've been on a few of his job sites, and I've gotten to know him, just in the hemp space. He's a good guy, and we're just really lucky to have him here in Pennsylvania. And I guess we're just lucky to have him, in the world in general. Anyway, let's get into my conversation with Cameron. Cameron McIntosh, welcome back to our podcast. How have you been?
Oh man, always a pleasure, Mr. Herlock. I'm doing well. Just gliding into the end of our season here and trying to put all the fires out.
Yeah. Well, so for folks who don't know who you are a Hempcrete builder with Americhanvre Cast-Hemp. You're located here in Pennsylvania. And you've been on the show a couple of times, but I thought since it is coming to the end of the year, we could sort of do like a year in review. Like, how has Hempcrete come over the past year, and how's your business developing? What kind of projects you got involved in? So why don't you first just give us a real brief introduction to the work you do and your company?
Yeah, sounds good. We are essentially an installation subcontractor up here in Allentown. We're set up that way for liability purposes, but we install the material Hempcrete on projects with our spray application system, the eReezy Hempcrete system. And then we're also training folks on how to use that system and now selling that system here in the United States, which is pretty cool. Then we also supply building grade hemp hurd for our own projects and for others. And we've also this year recently started adding the horse bedding SKUs, horse bedding, chicken bedding from our same supplier there in France. But we're just, we're sort of fulfilling those for the guy that imports for us. So so we're materials, equipment, installation services, consulting, and also we've been doing quite a bit of educating, speaking, public speaking engagements and things like that, not just at the trade shows, but also now recently, excitingly for me, at higher education institutions. So that's really cool.
Cool. Awesome. So you said you're importing your material from France. When do you predict you'll be able to get the same quality of hurd domestically?
There's people that are getting really close. Without naming names, I mean, a couple of the big Midwestern producers are getting there. We've gotten samples from anybody and everybody that says they're close, and we happily pay for them. We'll get a 500-pound super stack, which to me is a representative sample. I can't tell much from a 1-gallon Ziploc bag of your finest hemp hurd. But it's really exciting. People are getting really close. On that note, I will say that one thing, for any producers, fans of the show, anybody looking at doing it, please get involved with the effort to get certification and testing standards for these materials, whether it's building grade hemp hurd or animal bedding. Here in the United States, without an ASTM certification, for a building product, really makes it difficult. We have language in the new IRC code that sort of suggests and leaves the door open to the fact that these materials should be examined and certified by someone. So it's not enough just to have the right size. There's, cleanliness in terms of dust and fiber, packaging, there's a lot that goes into it. And we participated in that early on, while I was on the USHBA with Jacob Waddell, leading the charge there. And the process is still in play as far as I know, but I am not a hemp hurd producer. I started bringing this material in so that we had the material we needed for our projects because it was, reliable, consistent, gave us a good result. I didn't want to be spraying people's houses with a material that was new to the American market, was something that could lead to a failure. So sure. Really want to encourage anyone that's listening to please join that ASTM D37 subgroup. If you're a producer, this is your homework. You guys need to be in those conversations. I understand that there's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts, and you're trying to get a processing facility going and working with farmers. Farmers are obviously not the best in a Zoom type meeting. Maybe perhaps it's not their forte, but it is really where they need to be. So I think the sooner that we get an ASTM, building grade certification for hemp hurd that producers here in the United States can start applying for, then the closer we'll be to having what I would consider to be a good regulated product here for the American market. Now, remember too, for your listeners, we're on the East Coast, so it's never been as painful for me to import from France as it would be if you live in the Midwest or further west. So I'm hoping within the next couple of years, maybe 2 years or so, that that opportunity will be there. Unfortunately, with the cost of importing right now, it's sort of an opportunity for American producers. They're going to get a little bit higher of a dollar value for a really nice, clean building grade hurd than they would have, pre-COVID, before everything went out of whack. So it's an opportunity. It's going to evaporate, though. You're seeing the shipping costs in the Pacific shipping lanes are dropping rapidly. They're cutting down to almost half. The Atlantic shipping lanes are still high, but that's going to happen eventually. We're gonna come back down to reality, I think, on import. But yeah, I mean, as soon as possible. And for everyone listening, again, we are not a producer. The only reason why we sell hemp hurd is because we got into it so that we could have it for our projects. The opportunity opened up to bring in the same quality for animal bedding that we're bringing in for building grade from our same supplier, and that's why we're doing it.
All right, so there's a lot there that I want to dig into.
Yeah.
But first of all, the IRC code, if you could just briefly explain what happened with that this year and how it's affecting you or the industry at large.
Yeah, very, very exciting for all of us. Last year around this time, there was a small group of us, including the two consultants that we hired through the U.S. Hemp Building Foundation, Martin Hammer and David Eisenberg. The two of them are responsible for the inclusion of straw bale, light straw clay adobe, tiny home, and now Hempcrete to the IRC. So these two are mavericks. Their names carry weight. When they walk into those, subcommittee meetings for IRC, people know who they are. So we were working, long, painful hours, small group of us writing this document about this time last year for submission. I think in early January. The effort was really being spearheaded by Jacob, our president at that point, Jacob Waddell. The index was completed. We sent it around, had it reviewed by a panel of experts from around the world, the UK hempcrete builders, French, all of the real big powerhouse, builders in the world for hempcrete, took a look at it and gave their seal of approval. It was submitted and put before the IRC committee in March, coincidentally on the same day as our first EREZ training, which is really special. Matt and I, again, Matt Marino from Homeland Hempcrete was with me for that training. We can talk about that more later, but we were together for that first training with Damien from France, teaching people how to spray with the EREZ on the same day that, another team was presenting that index to the committee. There's about 10 people or so. And they stood in front of the committee to present the work that we had done. At the end of what was a real slog fest for that committee, it was like a 3-day long, biannual, I believe, hearing by IRC to hear new proposals, and we were the last one, so they were pretty worn out by the time they stood up. And there was 10 people to stand up and talk about Hempcrete, and they said, look, there better not be any overlap in what you're all about to say. But having Martin and David involved, we knew that. We were coached ahead of time. The folks that delivered the IRC index to the committee were absolutely fantastic. So at that point, there was no opposition. It was recommended to go in the commentary, which is a period of binding and loosing that occurs over new additions to the code. And then here in about late September, it was formally, how do we say this? It was formally recommended for approval by the committee. Now, that means that it will appear in the IRC index. What people have to understand is that the IRC index updates to it are not just blanket openly accepted state by state. Okay, so there's several states that are still operating on the 2017 version of the IRC index, which coincidentally is just before the addition of things like straw bale, light straw clay adobe, tiny home, now hempcrete. So I think there's a few states now the work becomes going state by state, and presenting to the code enforcement community in each state why they should accept these updates. So although it's massive, I mean, the inclusion of a natural building material into the IRC is big news. It's a big deal. It doesn't happen often, and the reason for it is so that the local code enforcement officials have prescriptive guidance on how to make sure that these projects are being done safely.
Right,
okay,
right.
so there's no soft language. There's no you can, you may. It's you must, you will. It's very, very specific. So it takes that burden of proof off. Even if the state that you're in hasn't approved it or accepted that update, it takes the burden of proof off of that code enforcement official to say, okay, we'll agree, we'll go for it. Here's this whole index for the IRC. Yes, our state hasn't approved it, but for your purposes, we feel a lot more comfortable having this. So it never stopped us before in all the work that we've done in the last 2 years not having that index, because hempcrete is not structural. It's basically an insulation infill. We don't change the way that the building is built other than, that envelope around it. So structurally, you're not changing anything. And that's what sort of propelled us, without having that index for custom one-of-a-kind residential, rural residential homes. But this is a good step in the direction of being able to do more aggressive projects like multifamily housing or commercial projects. It does not allow you to do those, but it's a good step in that right direction, right, saying that we've got good prescriptive guidance on how to do this properly that could lead to the potential to have it included in the IBC, which is our commercial building code. So those are the next steps.
All right, cool.
Sorry, man, long answers, dude.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Can you give us an overview of some of the projects that you worked on over this past year?
Yeah, sure. So again, like I mentioned, our year kind of started with the Easy trainings that we did in our warehouse there, which is really fun. Damien and his wife Celine came from France. We had Matt out from Homeland Hempcrete. The reason for that being that we chose to do Matt's panelized system. Matt worked with the structural engineer, Anthony Dente, that we hired for that IRC submission to come up with a pre-panelized wall system for hempcrete construction. So offsite modular construction with hempcrete that was fully within the guidelines set out by that IRC index. So that was really great. So I said, Matt, why don't you come out? We'll build some of your panels, give people the opportunity to learn how to spray without me taking them out to a homeowner's job site, which at that point would have been John Price. Right. John probably would have been okay with it, but I didn't want to take a bunch of people that didn't know how to spray out to do that. So anyway, so we had our spray training, which was really great. We had about 15 different people from all over the country show up for that. They learned how to spray 4 days together. Really, really wonderful group of people. We got some good video footage of that. You can look forward to that coming out here later, this winter. Okay. We're going to put together some imagery from that. And then we did a small new build cast in place workshop up in Prompton, Pennsylvania with Jamie. Can't remember the name of his. He runs that health food store, Healthy Alternatives. So Jamie from Healthy Alternatives in Prompton, real pillar of that community. He's had a health food alternative store in that community for the last 40 years. So real awesome guy. Really great workshop, small building, but we got it done in about 4 days. Did the roof on that as well. So that was really fun, getting the guys up on the roof and packing hempcrete in the ceiling, which we don't often do on our projects. Then from there,
wait, hold on. I have to stop you there.
Yeah.
There was also roofing material, or was it just a hempcrete roof? I don't follow you.
So the roof was framed to be able to accept the depth of hempcrete that would be needed for, filling that roof cavity. We went straight from the walls up into the roof. Okay. Which, when you're talking about building science, that is a full envelope around the building, less, right, window and door openings made out of the same material. So you have a single piece of insulation around the entire building. Right. The reason why it doesn't often get done on larger projects is because it's an engineering challenge to account for the weight of the extra material in the ceiling, and then also the build out depth. Another engineering challenge. How do you get the depth that you need if we're saying and this will be a good segue into a later part of our conversation. But if you're going to say the R value of hempcrete is 2 per inch, and you need an R40 in a ceiling cavity on a residential home in Pennsylvania, that means a 20-inch thick ceiling cavity. Wow. So not only do you have the weight issue to worry about here in the Northeast, you could have a nor'easter at any time, dump 3 feet of snow on top of that roof as well. You also have that engineering challenge of how do you build out that space to 20 inches, which is totally unheard of for a roof cavity with any other insulation. So, and beyond that, it adds a lot of cost.
But then you put a roof on top of that, though, right?
Yeah, correct. It's treated sort of similarly to the way the walls are, where it needs to be made airtight. The vapor permeability needs to be maintained. So you have a ventilated air cavity with some kind of, space age house wrap over the actual material, that ventilated air cavity, and then whatever roofing product you want at that point. So, yeah.
Cool. Okay.
So then we went up to Vermont, really, really pretty town in central Vermont, to spray a residential home for a guy named Chris and his family. Really interesting place. They are a cidery winery. They do all natural ferments. They don't filter. They don't add sulfates, any of that stuff to the bottles. There's sediment in the bottles. I mean, it's a really, really awesome operation. Started out as a small thing in the center of the community, and then blossomed out into what they are now, where they're working on a cooperatively owned farm, which is really cool.
Nice. What's the name of that operation?
So that's Fable Farm in Vermont, and Johnny, the guy Chris's brother, had actually built a hempcrete house for himself back in 2019. So they're on that same site, right across the little dirt road from where we were spraying Chris's house, which is a beautiful timber frame home. Was Johnny's house that had been cast in place, back almost when I started my career. So that was really cool to see. Really, really awesome group up there. That was a big house, Eric. That was like 420 bags of material in 8 days. Wow. The last day of which we did 100 bags in one day, which is like 600 cubic feet. It was insane. It was a long day.
Yeah.
We had to do that because there was rain coming and we were losing labor, and it just came to this crescendo, which they tend to do, hempcrete projects. But anyway, really pushed the system that day and really saw, what it was capable of when everything's, ideal. So crazy project, lost a few years of my life, I'm sure, doing that. And then from there, we had a very busy, I would say it was a very busy July. Can't remember what we did in June. I'm sure there was something. But anyway, July lined up to where, because my wife had planned a Hurlock style family vacation in our camper for August, I had to kind of backload everything to July and September. So July got to be very busy. I had a project a week, basically. First week we were in Michigan with Kim Crows and Stephanie from Eco Fiber Fort. They have been up here several times to take workshops with us. They came and took the eReasy training. Kim has actually now bought the eReasy system. And so Kim and Stephanie had a project there in Michigan, which turned out to be the first hempcrete home in Michigan. So that was really cool. Got a lot of press, nice. A lot of fanfare for Kim and Stephanie around that. So yeah, that was a cool little project we sprayed, and exciting for me because it was, validation of the fact that, other people are capable of doing this as well. Which is a big question mark in my mind at one point. Not for any other reason than just it's brand new and it's miserable labor intensive work. But yeah, Kim and Stephanie really rose to the occasion. So that was incredible for a lot of reasons to have to put the two of them in a position to be able to execute that project properly. Was really, really great. Flying on a serious high after that one. Came back to our neck of the woods here and sprayed Eric's house finally up at the Hempstead in Stroudsburg.
Eric Titus White. Yep.
Eric Titus White. Yep. He's been working real hard for, the past 3 or 4 years on that property. It's got a really cool CSA going on there. If anybody's interested in the area, go support them. His piece of land is Heritage Organic. It's been owned by the same family for 150 years before Eric bought it, and never a drop of pesticide or fertilizer because they raised bees. They were beekeepers.
Okay.
So first and foremost, that's what the land was used for. So anyway, really great CSA to support up there.
And that's a Delaware Water Gap area.
Delaware Water Gap. Yep. We finally sprayed his house. We actually had a guy named Harry who took our training that I met, a few months beforehand. He took our training, and then he actually went up and GC'd the project for Eric, getting us to the point of Hempcrete.
Okay.
And so we sprayed that. His Harry's Instagram name is Harry Hemp. Some of you might have heard of him
Harry
or know
Hemp,
him.
Hempcrete Harry.
He's running around in Texas right now, gaining as much experience as he can. So that was really cool. So there's another little little seed that we planted that's growing into an oak tree. But so yeah, Eric's place is really great. It's a 200-year-old log cabin that was a retrofit with a new addition. There's some new build aspect to it as well, but the main central part, we were actually spraying hempcrete against 200-year-old logs, which is really cool. So really beautiful project. It's shaping up nicely. Then after that, we had Damien, Celine, and their children, Esteban and Luan. Their adult children came with us to New York, project in Accord, New York, with the guys at Rondout Natural Builders. Really cool group in Accord. I'm saying that wrong. It's not pronounced the way the car is. It's actually Accord. You'll get in trouble if you say Accord in Accord, New York.
Oh, so it's Accord, New York?
Accord, if you're a local. Anyway,
okay.
So those guys, really cool project. They actually used a continuous exterior insulation as a permanent formwork that we then sprayed from the inside. So that was a really cool detail. They had a building science type, engineer friend who kind of worked with them on that. Really wonderful project for me though, having Damien and his family there. They were there just to support me. They came to, go on vacation with us in August, but came a bit early. So I got them out on a project, but we had Damien spraying, Celine was raking the box, Esteban was mixing, and Luan was helping me do rebound and screening and things that I never get to do, because I'm always on the end of the lance. So that was just I will say it was a very European job site, nice long lunch, but really great project. We got that one done quickly as well. Then we had about a month-long vacation, which was, what I've been looking forward to all year. We don't make lots and lots of money yet. We're still, a hemp business in an emerging space, but to be able to take a month off with the family was just amazing. So
and you rented an RV and drove around?
No, we have a camper. So we have a camper that Mel pulls behind her car. And then I actually lent Damien and his family my truck, and they rented a camper. There is a way to do that, by the way. I guess it's somewhat like Airbnb, where you can rent someone's camper and take it to Tennessee if you're inclined to do so. You did it, right?
Yeah, we did RV share. I've got some things to say about that, but different conversation. Just check the tires first, people.
The one they rented didn't have a motor, so it was a little bit less stressful than yours. So that was great. We had them with us. We went down to the Great Smoky Mountains. In Tennessee, Gatlinburg area. Spent some good time there.
Did you go to Dollywood?
No, you know what is funny? We drove out through Pigeon Forge, which I didn't even know existed. We went into downtown Gatlinburg, which is a little surreal. It's like the boardwalk,
except there's no ocean, right?
Yeah, right, and there's no ocean, and all kinds of interesting people walking around. But then on the way out, we drove through that, Pigeon Forge where Dollywood and all the big attractions are. And the kids' eyes were like saucers. They're like, why didn't you take us here?
When we drove through there, my kids were still asleep because we had to get up super early to get out to Hempwood. Yeah, we're like, good thing they didn't see this. Yeah, because there's so really much fun stuff down there.
Our children were very offended that we didn't take them there. So now we know it exists. But anyway, on the way home from there, we actually stopped in Asheville, North Carolina, up in the mountains to meet with Tim Callahan. And Tim Callahan, for those of you that don't know, is one of our hempcrete pioneers here in the United States. In fact, the first house that was built with hempcrete, as far as we know, in 2008 or 10, I think it was in Asheville. And it was one that Tim did to passive house standards. It's very, very well known. It's the Now House. I think at this point, the people living there are renting it from the owners, so they weren't super excited to see us show up on their front lawn. But,
they didn't give you a tour.
But they were cool about it. They were nice. So we met with Tim. So that was really fun to introduce Damien to Tim. Tim, we got connected to through the IRC push. Tim sort of resurfaced at that point. He's at a point in his career where he takes on what he wants to work on, and he's a little bit of an enigma as far as I knew. But he resurfaced and helped us. He was one of the editors for the IRC index. He looked over it with us. And that's how we kind of reconnected. So that was really fun to stop in and meet Tim. And then, from there we went to Raleigh, and then, a couple of weeks at the beach here and there. So that's about how that trip went. Really, really fun to share that with Damien and Celine and their family. And then after that, September, again, like I said, I backloaded, July and September, so that I could take that month off. September began with a trip out to British Columbia. I had to remove the post that I did about that project, though, because it was for a quote unquote famous person, and I did not have permission to share the images, so I can't really talk much about that one. But,
okay.
We did spray a hempcrete house in British Columbia, and I can't say where or for who,
a famous person.
It was a cool project, yeah. So that was.
It wasn't Paul McCartney, though, right?
No, I wish. Yeah, nothing. Nobody too famous, but
I'm still putting it out there that I want to interview Paul McCartney on this show.
Okay.
So just letting the universe know that's my desire.
Yep.
Anyway, and then after that, you went to like Puget Sound, though, right? Because I interviewed a woman named Segway that you were working with. There was a segue there, right? Okay.
That was, that was a nice segue there. So that project was in Bremerton, I believe, Washington, right outside of Seattle. A little bit of a tough experience for me. I caught or contracted COVID somewhere along the line in between coming through the Vancouver airport. So showed up first day of the 4-day workshop. I was bright and chipper and cheery. Had a really great group of people show up for that one too, on a really cool project. Segway's, building a really cool home/studio for herself that will grow over time. She's doing the first stage now. She'll add to it later. It was cast in place. By the second morning, everybody started to notice that I wasn't feeling well. I put my jacket on to work. For whatever reason, I was feeling cold. By early afternoon that day, I was a total wreck.
Oh, wow.
So that was a really tough experience. Great group of people, but a really tough experience for me, and sort of punctuated for me the reality that, it's fun to go travel and do hempcrete projects, but in a lot of ways it's inappropriate. There are people around the country now that, are getting closer to knowing how to do these projects. I think that, as always, it should be something that should be held locally and can be done locally. It was good for me. I know the reason why Segway brought me out was to have access to someone who knew what they were, doing, so that she didn't mess up. So that was, even though I had COVID, I kind of propped myself up in a chair and I was still sort of directing and orchestrating. But yeah, just in general, modern times, man, it just, just that kind of stuff, traveling to the West Coast to do a hempcrete workshop, the cons far outweigh the pros in a lot of ways. So that was an interesting experience for me for a lot of reasons. But the most of which just being that, we shouldn't have to travel all over the country to do this. People should be empowered to do it in place and to, build their community locally. So anyway, so from there came back, and then had a really interesting project. I was still sort of coming out of the back end of COVID, right? Scrambled brain, lethargy, all that kind of stuff. And had a really neat experience up in Massachusetts with a group who's working on a sustainable housing community, the first half of which already exists. It was done with, they're sort of condo type, multifamily units. The first half they did with concrete and EPS foam pre-made panels, so full wall section tilt-up panels. Interestingly enough, they had a facility on site to make those panels, so there was no shipping involved. They built them in the back and then shuffled them out and stood them up. Really cool community, shared solar, native edible plantings for landscaping, big rainwater system, so all the toilets flush off of rainwater. I mean, this guy did everything that I've been dreaming about,
Right.
tying together in one project, and that a lot of our clients have, brought aspects of into their own projects. But I don't know if it was COVID, scrambled brain, or what. I called Mel and I said, yeah, these guys are really excited. They really like the eReasy system. we went to do a demonstration. They're looking at doing the other half of their units with the eReasy system and Hempcrete, acknowledging the fact that the concrete in their first units was not the most sustainable choice, right?
Sure. Right.
So I called Mel and I said, "Wow, these guys are really excited. You know, it was a really great, demonstration. I think they might buy the eReasy." And she said, "Cam, I already sold them one." So I was like, "Whoa, okay." So that was really exciting, and we've been going back and forth with them a bit on their wall detail. The test panels we sprayed were a pretty great success for what they were as a test. Really exciting. There's a couple things that they're going to change on the design for their full wall panel sections. The two that we sprayed weren't very large, maybe 8 foot by 5 foot. But the ones that they'll actually be producing are like full gable end walls for the facility that are 25 feet high and 20 feet long. So they're
Nice.
serious. It's a big project. But really exciting for us because it's like sort of the promise of what we had only dreamed of when we started in Hempcrete, of like someone taking on and building an entire community out of it, with the mindset of the sustainability and the the livability of the material. So that's been really exciting.
And it's happened relatively quickly. Like you got into this business, you said like 2017, 2018?
18, and we started. 19, I went full time.
Yeah, so that's great. That's moving pretty quick.
Short period of time, for that. So that was a really great experience. I'm really looking forward to those guys and sharing that story with everybody. I think it's a really, really exciting one. And I'll share that, the first half of the units that they've built are already fully occupied, and it's by and large by people who are having a crisis of conscience around their impact on the environment. And that we're very excited to say that, someone has built a house that I can live in, a condo that I can live in, where I don't have to worry about about my impact on the environment.
Right.
So that's incredible. And we kind of know that. I mean, that's when COVID happened and I had just started this business, it was terrifying. I've said this to you before. I didn't know if I'd made a huge mistake, but it turns out that it was the right time for Hempcrete, and it continues to show us that recession fears, all that stuff, people are still aligned in the right direction there, and they're still interested in this kind of stuff. So, that project up there in Massachusetts is the same, sort of affirmation.
Right. And your story is a great example of, like trust in your gut, following your heart, and, dreaming stuff, and like, here's what I want to do. And then you're making it happen. So I think you're an inspiration to a lot of people, Cameron.
It's surreal. I'd say it's surreal in a lot of ways, especially when you're talking about the kind of project that these guys are putting together. I mean, this is it. This is the real, the rubber's meeting the road here. This is.
You use the phrase crisis of conscience. I hate to wish any crises on anybody, but I feel like more people could use a crisis of conscience when it comes to their environmental impact.
Without it negatively affecting our lives, we should all be terrified.
Yeah. Moving on a little bit, because we do have a little bit of a time constraint. So a couple more things I want to talk about. One, you've done some like speaking engagements and education opportunities. Just kind of hit some of the highlights of those.
Sure. Yeah. So in September, we were invited to do a guest lecture at Jefferson University with their first year engineering students. So I did about an hour-long lecture on what is Hempcrete and a little bit about our work. Mm-hmm. And then we actually did a demonstration for them in their lab, which is really cool. So I packed a little cubic foot, made some snowballs for everybody that they could take home. Typical Hempcrete workshop fodder, right? But that was really great engagement. First year anything class at a big university like that, you're gonna get a lot of dozing off and odd looks from the back of the classroom, but the kids are really into it. So that was exciting. Then after that, we actually did another speaking engagement, this time via Zoom, for the AIA Committee on the Environment in Philly. It's a group that meets once a month, on a Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. just for an hour, and focused on sustainability in architecture. So that was another really great opportunity to address a group of, practicing architects. And so, we did our same sort of boilerplate. What is Hempcrete? Why you should use it. discussion. And then just 2 weeks ago, we were up at Rensselaer Polytechnic in Troy, New York.
Mm-hmm.
Another guest lecture for first year architecture students with a demonstration again. Really wonderful experience. All three of those have been great experiences, punctuated by the fact that I can now say that there's a building code index for this material. And that's sort of what we finish on, right? Is a link for all the students to look at a real live Hempcrete building code. So that just makes it all the more real for them. And again, same thing at Rensselaer Polytechnic. The kids were really engaged. They were really excited. And it's not just because I'm any good to listen to. It was just the subject matter was appealing to them. They really liked it. And it was an opportunity to plug, specifying healthy materials in their projects. So, for example, at the one at Rensselaer Polytechnic, they've been focusing on wall systems and the layers that you need to achieve passive house performance. You've got air tightness to worry about, moisture management, vapor control, all these things in a traditional, with contemporary building materials and a contemporary wall system are difficult to achieve. There's many layers. You're relying on a lot of petrochemical tapes and sealants to hit these high-end, high-performance building standards. Hempcrete is a way to simplify that, and that's what really got them excited. And actually, the professor that brought me up there, Arta, she had a friend named Barry come, and we had coffee ahead of time, so I got to talk to Barry quite a bit. He's a very successful passive house, architect. Several projects actually with, off-site construction, modular panels. So that was really cool to talk to him about all that. But, that was the impression I left on him. He said, if Hempcrete is able to achieve some of these things that we're looking for in passive house with a more simple wall assembly, then it's game on, because these high-end, high performance passive house type homes, they cost every bit as much or more than Hempcrete would, as compared to, contemporary 30-year standard building materials. So that was really cool. I mean, again, it kind of puts it in this, exclusive category still. It's sort of in that exclusive category where you have to be able to afford that crisis of conscience, right?
Right. Yeah.
Which is the miserable thing about all things sustainability. But, the more it's adopted, the more we get young architects and engineers excited about it. It's on their minds. They go off to do an internship. They're sitting at a table with, colleagues wherever they're working, and they say, "Have you ever heard about Hempcrete?" I mean, that right there, that's worth every moment, every dollar spent to go do these kinds of engagements. So again, we don't get paid much to do these, but I'm very happy to do those. Very happy to have those conversations with first-year architecture engineering students, practicing architects. There's so much more value to be derived than the typical speaking engagements that we get asked to speak at, where we're speaking to an industry-specific group of people where they already know Hempcrete's great. They already like Hempcrete. They build their house at Hempcrete tomorrow.
Preaching to the choir. Yeah.
Right. Preaching to the choir. So to me, all of these engagements are just far more empowering. And actually, tomorrow, be getting in the car and heading down to Richmond, Virginia, to present to the Virginia Housing Commission, which is really neat. Their Secretary of Agriculture, representatives from their Department of Ag, all that kind of stuff. So again, that's been an interesting thing for me this year, is those the way that the speaking engagements have evolved from primarily industry specific, which are great. It's a celebration of all things hemp, to now building professionals, people that are actually in a position to specify the material.
Right.
That's huge. That's very impactful. And I'm keen to do, as many of those as I can.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the thing. I think a lot of the hemp businesses are trying to just get into the other industries that hemp is going to disrupt a little bit.
Right.
So that brings me to an interview that I did over the summer.
Oh boy.
With a guy named Bill Althouse.
Yeah.
Smart guy. He's been in many different industries for a long time. I sort of saw that interview as partial voice in the wilderness, maybe. I don't know. He had a lot to say. He had a lot to say about different aspects of industrial hemp. And one of his main points was, hemp has to focus on legitimization, right? Trying to make it be legitimate in the eyes of, those other industries that that would be using it. And one of the points he made was this ASTM R value test. And he was sort of complaining like, they won't just spring for the $300 test. They got to do this test for R value. And so I've been meaning to ask you about this. I know you heard the interview and I know you have a response to it. And I think you've got something else. So where are you on this R value thing?
I'll start by saying that, I've spoken to Bill before. To his credit, Bill does participate in the ASTM subcommittee. I have to hand that to him. That's more than a lot of people in this industry that form an opinion have done. And by and large, I agree with a lot of what he said. I'll be the first one to tell you that, I am not here to over purport the hempster myths about hempcrete or any building material. It's not a whatever. It's not a miracle cure for everything that ails us. And I think that's what, a lot of what Bill was saying, about the hemp industry at large in general. That's sort of what his comment was, right? It's like, let's not get, ahead of ourselves here. This isn't just, I believe it's a miracle in a lot of ways, but it's not just this, blanket miracle. Anyway, point being is that, yes, although I do agree with a lot of what Bill said and the sort of intention behind the way that he delivered it, what we've been working on as a group, as the industry, or as the people who are actually trying to forward the industry, the IRC index was first top tier. That was our first focus, getting into the code. We hired Martin Hammer and David Eisenberg, again, who have had success getting other natural building materials into the code. When we discussed this with them, they had a route and a method where we could include hempcrete without having to go too deep into the weeds over all of the testing details. And damn it, if they weren't right, it's in. They got it in. And that's not to say that it's lacking or missing anything. It's just that the process for establishing these tests is not just as simple as Bill made it sound. It's not just as simple as, let's throw some hempcrete in a box and send it off to a lab. What we had been working on prior to that, and I feel like this is where that interview was a little bit of a disservice to the work that's been done, was Jacob, in particular, and I was helping him at one point, had been focusing on the sample preparation protocol for hempcrete.
That's Jacob Waddell, the former president of the U.S. Hemp Building Association.
And currently heading up the Hemp Building Institute, which we'll talk about in a minute here. But, it wasn't just as simple as sending hempcrete off to the lab to have it tested, right? This is a new material. It's cementitious. It's unlike a lot of the installations that they get. And the whole fervor that Bill's describing around discussing R value came from a period in time where there were producers making things like building house wrap, like paper that goes on the outside of your house, and they were claiming an R value for it. Okay, so you can see where that gets messy really quickly, and where a company can say something that isn't in reality true. So that law that he's talking about, where the FTC came down with that ruling saying that you can be fined for claiming an R value without the proper testing, was to stem this onslaught of building materials that were just pulling random R values out of thin air and claiming them and marketing that way. So, which we've never done. In my opinion, what the difference with hempcrete is that we do have very robust testing data and lots and lots of it from Europe. My own mixture, the hempcrete, the Easy hempcrete that we use, has a European thermal test that is displayed in terms of U value that, when translated to R value, gets you an R value of 2.2. So I'm not out here saying Easy hempcrete is R7 per inch or something wild. What I'm saying, and we don't publicize that. It's not on our website. Really, it's only ever shared with code enforcement offices, this European data that I have, or clients. The reason being is that I don't want to get a fine from the FTC.
Right.
I know who to thank if I do. Right? No, I'm kidding. But anyway, point being is that it was not as simple as Bill had made it sound. And unfortunately, with the manpower and the funding that we had available to us, the big push was to get hempcrete into the IRC. Although at the same time, we were focusing on the process for going through this ASTM C518 hot plate test, which is the basic test. It's one plate at one temperature on one side of a material with another plate on the other side that measures over time that, that energy transfer through the material, right? It's stupid simple. That's why it sounds simple, but it's not. For Hempcrete, we had to come up with a sample preparation protocol, and sample preparation and handling protocols in order to be able to deliver a sample to the laboratory that was going to, perform the way that you wanted it to. So I think it was an unfair shake in terms of that's just one person's opinion looking in. And I share his frustration. We all want these things to happen immediately, but they don't happen immediately. They don't happen overnight. And, it sort of flies in the face of the work that has been done, a lot of it behind closed doors, not for any other reason that nobody else wanted to walk through that door. It's just the people that were willing to sit down at the table and do the work.
Yep.
We're human beings, we're running businesses, we have other things to do. So there wasn't any avoidance. I mean, again, in our particular case, we have a great host of European testing data that Damien has done on our specific Hempcrete mix. So I did not feel the pressure that others might have felt in terms of, it wasn't stopping me. Not having that American R value wasn't stopping me from getting projects done, because again, one of a kind, custom, rural residential homes being built in areas where the code enforcement officer was happy with what we presented, which was European testing data. Right now, when you're talking about doing larger projects, or in the case of me as a producer of Hempcrete materials and a distributor, that's where it becomes more important to have that American testing done, right? So for me, it was really just, timing. I had to get my life together to be able to do it. So sitting behind me right now actually are 6 samples, 24 inch by 24 inch, 2 inch, 4 inch, and 6 inch thicknesses that we sprayed actually up at Eric's place that will be heading down to a laboratory in Tennessee, which is nearby to our friend Jacob Waddell. We've sort of engaged Jacob and the Hemp Building Institute to see our samples through this process, right? So I created the samples using the sample preparation protocol that Jacob came up with, right? I'm curing them right now and I'm weighing them every day to see the data, the weight change in terms of moisture value to know when they're cured enough to be ready for testing. That was part of our sample preparation protocol. And then beyond that, I've asked the lab that's actually going to do the test, which in my case ends up being about $1,500. So it's still not a crazy amount of money, but it's more than what was implied. Jacob's actually going to accompany those samples all the way through the process. So we'll have someone who knows about Hempcrete. The lab that we've chosen, actually, we were connected to by Bill.
There you go.
So, steps in the right direction, right? And so we're hoping that here at the beginning of January, Jacob's actually going to come up, retrieve these samples from me, take them down to the lab, and he's going to participate through the whole process. So just a quick side note about what Jacob's up to, the Hemp Building Institute. This is literally what Jacob is focusing on now. When you're looking at running a big trade organization like the USHBA, there's a whole lot of moving parts and a lot of things that take your time and energy away from, in our case, the meat and potatoes of testing and certification. So Jacob has started the HBI basically to take on and really focus on testing and certification. And what I'm hoping is that he becomes a resource for any producer, in the spirit of Bill's criticism, any producer that wants to produce a hemp building material, whether it's hempcrete or hemp wool, that they can go to a trusted party like Jacob at the HBI and say, hey, how do we go through this process? What are the steps we need to take? What tests do we need to do? What's it going to cost? How long is it going to take? All of these things, as simple as Bill made it sound, were totally difficult. It was almost impossible to get straight answers on any of it. How do we write the IRC? Who do we go to? How do we had to dig through a lot of to find the answers to that. So in a similar fashion, now Jacob is setting himself up to basically be that single source where you can say, hey, I've got a Hempcrete mixture, I want to test it out, and I want to be able to market the R value. How do we do that?
Oh, cool.
You know what I mean? So we're really excited about that. And it's the right way to do it. It's putting Jacob in a position to do what he does really well, as he demonstrated with the IRC code, which is the scientific side and the scientific aspect of getting the certification, the testing done for Hempcrete. So we're really excited about that.
Cool. I will follow up with Jacob in the new year and see how things are coming along. But speaking of the new year, it sounded like 2022 was a great year for you.
It was.
Looking forward to 2023? What's on your horizon?
Oh man. So there's the development project up in Massachusetts. Will be there for a certain period of time, I'm sure, helping those guys get their process down. They've bought all the equipment. They're ready to go. They're ordering materials right now. We've got a pretty considerable sized project in Minnesota that I'm really excited about. There's a couple there, Jeremy and Ivy. They're both pathologists at the Mayo Clinic. So brilliant people, in that part of the world because of the work that they do. And they're looking to build what is going to be, I think, probably the most attractive, example of hempcrete building in the country. It's going to be sort of a cottage-esque, exterior lime plaster, thatched roof, hempcrete home, really beautiful design. We've been working really hard with the architects and the engineers, leading up to this, been, in discussion with these folks for over a year now. But quite a big project too, in terms of volume. It's about 600 bags, which is, 3,600 cubic feet. So it's, easily twice the size of my normal project, if not more, 3 times. But just really excited to do that one, for the clients. They want to really sing the song of healthy materials and make it a demonstration piece. And so we'll definitely be doing some, content around that. And then a host of other, smaller projects, some offshoots, always, very, very commonly offshoots of other projects that we've done. There's another guy that helped on that project in Accord, New York, with Damien and Celine, that bought the leftover material, and he's going to spray his house, so there's always some interconnectivity. But what I'm really trying to focus on, Eric, is, as mentioned earlier, and as punctuated by my experience on the West Coast. Great projects, great people, but difficult experiences for a lot of reasons. My focus this year is going to be, how do we stay closer to home? And I feel like that's important, not only for my family. We've got small kids. I don't want to miss that. But just in general, it's, all this globe trotting and running around. It's really not sustainable. It's fun for me. It's good for the company in terms of proof of concept. We have all of that. I don't feel like we need to prove that anymore. So my goal now is to figure out, how do we reel it in, stay a bit closer to home, and work harder empowering people in other areas like Kim and Stephanie in Michigan with this piece of equipment, our friends in Massachusetts. That's the great thing about the Easy system, is it's clear now I don't have to be the one on the lance. The equipment's affordable, and people can pick it up and start, doing hempcrete projects wherever they are. Doesn't always have to involve me, and so that's what I'm really looking forward to for 2023, is kind of recentering and getting a bit closer to home. We've got a couple of grant opportunities out with the Department of Ag, again, with our friends at Don Services, PA Hemp Industry Council. Now Erica helped us, get involved on one of those. Did another one with Altogether now, so there's a lot of good stuff in Pennsylvania, man. We're just so primed and ready for it, thanks to you, thanks to Erica, thanks to the Department of Ag. We've got all the pieces we need here in Pennsylvania, and it's a shame that I'm traveling all over the country, and I've only done 2 houses in Pennsylvania, one in Pittsburgh and then John's in Pottstown. So there's got to be a way to kind of push that in the other direction. So
cool. Well, that sounds like you've got a lot going on. And thank you for spending some time with me and letting us hear about it. It's always great to talk to you.
Likewise, I didn't get to hear too much of your voice, but no,
well, that's the thing. I just ask questions. I don't try. I was just interviewed last week on a podcast called Have You Heard? This is
Matthew Soares and Ryan.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Ryan Doherty from USHBA. So if you really want to hear me talk, you can go listen to that, because they just ask me a question, I just start to chatter.
As long as you guys don't talk about homonym or whatever. Homily, what was that?
Homonyms, I don't even know what. Yeah. But yeah, I like being on this side of things, because I don't have to talk a lot.
Right. Yeah.
Wishing you, happy holidays to you and your family, and looking forward to catching up with you in the new year.
Yeah, likewise, Eric. Always a pleasure. Keep doing the good work, man. And we'll check back in soon.
Sounds good. All right, here we are. We're at the end of the show. We did it again. Finished another episode. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed this one. If you didn't, write to me and tell me why. You notice that I'm always trying to get you to write to me. Someday it'll work. I hear from some of you, and I appreciate it. I'm just thankful to know that you're all out there listening to our show regularly. So anyway, we've got one episode left before the new year. So look for that next week. Gonna take a week, possibly 2 weeks off over the holidays. So yeah, it's just giving you a heads up, okay? So all right, that's it. My name is Eric Hurlock, digital editor here at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Check us out online, get yourself a subscription. Just go to lancasterfarming.com and click on all the things you can click on, all right? Okay, so until next time, I will see you in the newspaper.
Industrial hemp.
This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2022 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written, recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Hurlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.